Welcome to our second lecture covering Microsoft Word Basics. Here we have the keyboard again that's going to kind of give us a starting point to the various keys that we're going to be using. So from time to time we'll return to this screen. But let's get started on some additional information that you need to know about Microsoft Word. If you haven't watched the first lecture yet, go ahead and watch that because this lecture will assume that you have mastered the material in the previous lecture. So let's get started. We're going to start by refreshing on the three types of justifications that we can have. When we talk about justifications, we're talking about where the text is going to be. So let me just make this bigger. I'm going to slide my slide over here like we talked about before. You notice it's on the lower right-hand side. We slide it to the right to make the screen bigger. And I'll scroll this down a little bit. There are three justifications that we have. We go to Home to get started on that. So I'm going to click on Home. And then we have we have four choices. We have four justifications. This is our kind of default, our usual justification. This is called a left justification because as you can see, it's on the left side of the screen. You can see it lines up right here with our left margin, and that's where the text is typically going to begin. This is where text usually begins if we are, writing a language that starts on the left side. If we were writing, say, Hebrew, obviously we'd probably have right justification. The second type, so let me just type something, the man. The second type of justification we can have is right justification. Again, what we might use if we were writing Hebrew. It's starting on this side. So we're going to have, let me just flip to some sentences up here. So if we look at this sentence, we can see that we have left justification because there's this nice straight border here. We see this here, here, here. If we were to go and change all this to right justification, it's going to look straight border over here. This is going to be what's called a ragged edge. Straight border here, ragged edge over here. So that's this choice and this choice. Obviously this one is no justification. It just sticks in the middle. We're not going to use that a lot, to be honest. It's not a very good look, honestly. We're really just going to use that for titles and things like that. Now there's a third justification, which isn't left justification or right justification. It's a combination of both, and it's called full justification. And you can see this picture kind of captures it. Now it's hard. Let me go ahead and add some more text here. The only thing we have to fear itself, said Winston Churchill. Okay, you can see in this that sometimes the space is kind of dragged apart and sometimes it's pretty close together. You can see that this space is smaller than this space. And that must be because that this has fewer characters in it than this line. Let's just look and see when we have it be left justified what it looks like. We're going to see that this goes in more than this line. Or I guess Winston flips from one line to another. And you can see what happens here is that when we have the full justification, this is a crisp line and this is going to be a crisp line. Now your last line of a paragraph isn't going to be crisp. Obviously, it would take a lot of work to drag out Churchill to go this whole line. That would look weird. So what you see when you have full justification is it looks more like a book. But it can lead to some weird spacing out of words within a particular line. So that's something to keep in mind. People vary. The bulk of your writing is either going to be left justification or full justification. I happen to prefer left justification, but there are plenty of good, reasonable people who prefer full justification. So my suggestion is that you talk with your someone in your law firm to see what the preferred approach is within your law firm, and then just to adopt that style. If there isn't one that seems to be preferred, then I guess you can pick the one that you happen to prefer. As I say, I really don't think that there's a rule of thumb with respect to it. My preference is left justification, but reasonable people can differ on that. So when I work, I'm going to use left justification, but that doesn't mean that you need to. So hopefully you can identify left, right, and full justification. For this class, we're only going to use right justification for one topic. Let me just go up here. And that is for the mode of delivery in the modified block letter. So we might say via UPS overnight delivery. And sometimes people will also italicize this or underline it or something along those lines, or maybe both. You can see if I want to change the format, I put my cursor right here before the first letter that I want to change. I right-click my mouse. I go over the surface of everything I want to change the appearance of. I lift my finger, then I go over here and do whatever it is I want to do. And then I click out of it. And now I have a format that's different. So that's how you make changes. So you do need to right justify your mode of delivery. Now let's talk about indenting. Indenting is when we push text in. So if I wanted to, let's say I chose to indent paragraphs. That's a personal preference. Some people like to indent paragraphs about 5 spaces, some people don't. Let's just start a letter here. Dear Mr. Green, colon, it was a pleasure to meet with you yesterday. I appreciate all of your hard work gathering the relevant documents. I will be here, let me just organizing them in the next few days. Okay, so let's say I wanted to indent my paragraphs. Not something we have to do, but something that some people prefer to do. One approach I could do would be to space, but we know that we don't want to space 5 times. If it's more, if we want to indent it more than 2 spaces, we should not use the space bar. So I'm going to go back to the margin, and now I'm going to tab. Now we can establish whatever tab I want to tab. For some reason it's not showing up here. I can pick, actually let me go back here and put a little, there we go. So I put a little tab here sign. If you know where you want the tab to be, you can just touch the line here and you'll get little tabs. You can have them more frequently if you want. You can have as many as you want. I guess within reason, they're not going to let us put too many in. So now when I hit tab, you'll see it just goes a little distance. So you can add tabs whenever you want. I can add a tab here. And so now it's going to go like this until we get to this tab. And now it's going to jump all the way to here. It's pretty common for people to set up tabs at the half-inch points. So, So I have them at the half-inch point. Now I can tab, and it's a good distance here. So because I wanted to indent more than 2 spaces, I'm going to tab instead of doing the indent. That's a way to indent so you have nice clean margins. Above our salutation, which is of course this line, we're going to do a ray line. And for a ray line, we're going to do a double indent. We're going to tab once, ray, colon, then we're going to tab again. Job application for, let's see, application for open paralegal position. You may think to yourself, well, why did you tab here? Why didn't you just do a space or maybe 2 spaces? You can do that. That's not wrong to do that. But there's a reason why you might not, and let me show you why. Let's say we're going to continue on. Let's say I want to cite the monster.com or we'll say indeed.com reference number. Let's say this position is Indeed ad number 123-456. Now I could put this up here on this line right here, but a lot of times it looks pretty sharp if you have more than one line for your ray line. And so one strategy would be to go to the next line. And look, what do I do here? I tab once, but I don't want my I here to line up with my R. I really want my I to line up here with my A. So let's try that. I'm going to tab over, and now it lines up perfectly. If I had instead hit the space bar, we'll see the difficulties that I'm going to encounter. So I'm going to tab to here. Now I'm going to try to go in until it lines up. Guess what? It's not ever going to perfectly line up. It's going to look a little bit wampus here. So what would be better for me would be to tab it, because now I really will get a nice clean line. It's going to be exactly straight up and down. So I'm going to put it right there. There we go. That gives us a nice clean line. And what I might do is I might italicize this or something like that, possibly, to draw the attention to it. So you can see in this situation I did a double tab. I tabbed here and then I tabbed here. Again, if you're just having one line to your ray line, it would have been okay if I had hit space twice or even once. You know, there could be reasons if you're just going to have one line but you've got a lot of content, and if you hit the tab, you're going to end up having content that goes to the next line. I mean, there can be strategic reasons that you might want to tab, but just be aware of that issue of getting things lined up. That's a very common problem that students have that results in a deduction. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Let's discuss margin. So I'm going to go to layout here. We're at home initially. We're going to go over here to layout. Now we're going to look at margins. This is what's called the normal, and it's 1 inch all the way around. 1 inch on top, 1 inch to the left, 1 inch on the bottom, 1 inch on the right. You can, of course, customize this by hitting custom margins, and there will be times that you will want to do that. Let's say you've got enough content for a letter, but you just need 1 or 2 lines. You've decided that you really don't want to edit any of the content out. So what you might do is you might just drop this to 0.9 or 0.8, or maybe you make your margins a little wider. That can be all that you need to do to get it all on one page. That's a strategy that can work. You probably don't want to go much more than 0.8, but you can certainly get to 0.8 if you need to. So generally your default setting is going to be 1 inch, and for this class I would ask that you stay with that. But there are other things that you can do in a crunch situation. It's pretty common that I see students who kind of have a weird margin over here. This should be pretty straight. I mean, there are reasons to indent things, but whenever I see that there isn't a straight line here, let me go back here. And so whenever I see that there isn't a straight line here, I ought to know why there's an indentation here. I ought to be able to figure out why there's an indentation here. And so that's an important thing to consider, the margins that you're going to work with. Another thing is orientation. Now we're going to use portrait. Just imagine the Mona Lisa. Well, since we're looking at the head and shoulders, we're going to have it be tall and skinny, our page. Landscape would be if you're showing a mountain range. That's going to be short and wide. It's the same paper, 8.5 by 11. It just depends upon whether the skinny part is up and down or the skinny part is left and right. We will do portrait, I think, in everything that we work on in this class, and certainly that is by far the most common. You do need to know those terms, though. A portrait orientation means this, what we have 99% of the time. And a landscape orientation is when we turn it on its side. Let's talk about bullets and numbering. Bullets and numbering is a really effective way to get your reader's attention. We're going to go back to home, and we're going to look at these two keys. This is bullets, and you can have lots of different choices for bullets. Really, it's kind of whatever you like, and you can actually come up with your own. But these are probably some good choices. I'm just going to go with this bullet right here. Nothing magical about it. It's going to automatically indent me a certain distance, and then it's going to tab me a little bit more. Now I can talk. Let's say I'm composing a grocery list. So I'm going to say milk. Then I'm going to go to the next line. It's going to assume I have more items. Eggs, bread, cheese, tomatoes. So now we have a list. I can change some of the details of this if I want to. You can see that we have 2 items here. This item, the first one, has to do with the location of our bullets. So since I've highlighted all of this, I'm going to move all of my bullets at once. So if I decide I want to move my bullets in, I can. Or I can move my bullets out. Either way. If I just wanted to move one bullet, I could do that. Probably don't want to, but I could. And you can see while I hover here, I can see, oh yes, they're all neatly lined up. You can see that this line right here shows how neatly they are lined. And then again, with this tab, the second one, I can move these if I want. Here we go. Took a little while to move it. Okay. So you have some flexibility about how this is going to be formatted. Let's say that I decide I don't want bullets, I want a numeric list. Maybe in my grocery store, the first part of the grocery store I'll go to has the milk, and then the eggs, and then the bread, and the cheese, and the tomatoes. This is helpful for me to kind of map my course. I have other choices other than the numbers. Maybe I want to use letters. Maybe I want to use Roman numerals. Lots of different techniques. I may want to put certain things in subcategories. For example, maybe I want to have a dairy section. Oops. There we go. I'm going to move the bread cut. Okay, so maybe I'm going to have a produce section. We'll say I'm also going to get lettuce. And maybe I want to have a bakery section. And maybe I also want donuts. I'm going to switch this back to bullets. But now I'm going to want to tab these items in because these are all part of that dairy section. So literally what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the tab button right now. And it indents it, and then it changes the format so that it looks different. So it's very clear, okay, these are kind of under the larger category of dairy. And then I can do this here. Same thing, I've highlighted it and I hit tab. And then here I've highlighted this and I hit tab. So this is a handy way of showing hierarchies of things along this line. So this is something that you'll want to use pretty often. There are a few devices that a writer has available to him or her more effective than tables and charts and bullets and things like that. You don't want to overuse them, and you want to use them to convey the most important information. There's sometimes where you'll have lists of things, but you really don't care about the reader remembering that list. Well, it would be easy to bullet it or to present it in some format, but because that's not what you're focused on, that wouldn't be a good use of that technique. Let's talk for a moment about establishing a new page. Sometimes, actually fairly often, you're going to be working on something and you decide, I want a page break at a certain point, but it's not where Microsoft is inclined to make a page break. Let me give you some examples. Let's say that where Microsoft wants to give a page break is right between a heading and the content under the heading. Well, you never want your heading to be the last thing appearing on the page. You want to have at least a couple of lines of whatever goes after the heading on that same page. And so what you would do in those situations is you would go to the beginning of the heading and then you would hit Control Enter. And that will start a new page. Let me show you those keys. So I'm going to hit this button, Control, I'll put it down first, and then I hit Enter. And that causes what oftentimes people call a hard return. It causes a page break right there. So it doesn't matter that it wasn't time for a page break, it's going to break the page then automatically. Now I can continue to, let me flip here, to write lots of other stuff. It's not going to push this content to lower lines. This is still at the top of the page. If I had done this instead, let me go back and bring it back here. If I instead had done this, if I had said, well, I want to start my page right here. I want this to be the first content on my next page. I could have hit the Enter button time and time again, right? That would work until we get to a new page. There we go. The problem with that approach is, number one, you can have to enter lots of times. And what I did to do that, of course, was I hit Enter many, many times. So it can require lots of hitting of that button. But probably the bigger reason you probably don't want to do that is that if I were to add a line, now is the time for all good men to come aid of their country. Women also ought to defend their country. What's happened, because I've added some lines of text, is that this is no longer at the top. You can see we have this space. And so now I'm going to have to go back and move this up and recenter it. So when you want to put a hard page break in, you'll want to use that Control Enter technique. Now you're not going to worry about page breaks until right before you're ready to submit the document, because if you put in a bunch of hard page breaks and then you turn around and add some more content, all of your page breaks are going to be off. So that's one of the very last things you do. But that's a helpful tool to make. Which again, you don't want is you don't want a page like this, where you have a heading and then the content under the heading is in the next page. I do take off for that. Now, other people have differing ideas about what you should do. Should you keep all the lines of a paragraph together on the same page, meaning that you do a hard page break at the beginning of that a final paragraph that's broken up onto 2 pages? Or do you allow a paragraph break? There's a variety of schools of thoughts about that, and sometimes people have varying answers depending upon the length of the paragraph and things like that. I'm not going to give you advice about that. It's really kind of a judgment call situation. But my hard and fast rule is do not break up a heading from at least its first line of content. Let's look at word search. This document is very short, but you may be dealing with 50 or 100-page documents from time to time. So what do you do when you've decided to maybe change the word? Maybe you had initially thought that you were going to use this term as a defined concept. Corporation. And so you've used this word, like 100 times, but you've decided, or maybe someone's told you, to use, let's say the name of the company is ABC Corporation, and the powers that be want you to use this as the abbreviation. So wherever the word corporation exists, you're going to want to replace it with this. You can go through and read each one of the pages of your document, but that's going to be a slow and tedious process, and you're probably going to miss some. So a better approach is to hit the Find button and find each instant that you have whatever the word is. If you are sure you want to replace them, you can hit Replace, and you type in what you want it to find. And then what you want to replace it with. Now, I suggest, you can have it do it automatically, but I suggest that you do Find Next and go through each one, because you probably will see situations in which you don't want to make the replacement. Maybe the first time you use it, maybe the word corporation was part of the complete name of the entity, ABC Corporations. If you were to replace corporation with ABC Corp, then you would have ABC Corp. That wouldn't be very good. So most of the time you're going to want to go use by use, not do replace all, because that's going to maybe over replace, but use replace instead so you can think about it. It's a much quicker way of changing out words than reading it from beginning to end, and it's also more likely to catch every single instance of that. So that's a strategy to help you do some global changes. Let's talk about how you're going to view your material. So we're back here. We're mainly going to be at home in this place, but I'm going to go over here to View. And I always like to have my ruler showing up, and I like to have my navigation pane. The other thing that some people like is the grid line. I don't care for the grid line, but I understand why some people like it. Let me just click it on so you can see what it looks like. And you can have this on or not as you see appropriate. It helps you line things up. With just the ruler, you have the measurements on top, but you can't see all of the relationships between things. And so again, that's a personal judgment. To me, this starts looking quite cluttered, but the ruler is key because I get to do my tabs, I get to move things around, I get to do all kinds of things that make my work better. So I strongly encourage you to have the ruler be visible so you can maneuver through things. I'm going to show you this briefly, but we're not actually going to do it. And that is, we're going to look at track changes. That's that review. This section is called track changes. This is a very common thing, especially for transactional legal professionals to use. Let's say we have a 100-page contract. We've drafted it, we're sending it to opposing counsel. They have some changes to make. Well, they're not going to go in and just make the changes because those are going to be points of disagreement or potentially disagreement. They're points of negotiation. So they're going to show those changes to us very clearly. Hey, we want to change the wording in paragraph 47, and they're going to show us what that language they would prefer. And then very likely we would come back and say, well, okay, we can change it a little bit, but we don't want to change it as much as you've changed it. And so there's a back and forth negotiation. If every time they make a suggested change, it changed the document and we couldn't see what the original form was or what they've added, it would be very difficult for us to negotiate over it because we'd constantly have to refer to earlier editions, earlier drafts, and kind of do a word-for-word comparison. But with track changes, it's going to tell us every time we make changes. I'm not going to go through this and show you exactly how it works. I just want you to know that it's here. We're not going to use it this semester, but this is an insanely useful tool that you will very likely be using professionally. Now, there are other applications outside of Microsoft Word that track document changes. So you might not use that Microsoft Word's tool, but just know that that is a very, very useful tool. Another thing I want to flag for you that we're really not going to use at all is the view. We're back here to view and we're going to look at properties. This gives us meta information about our documents. For example, we can see here when it was created, who created it. We can see how long it's been edited. We can see how many words and how many pages there are. Lots of different information. So let's say this matter became a subject of discovery. This information could be highly relevant to what's going on in the lawsuit. And so that information kind of is good to be aware of, that it exists and that it might affect decisions that you make as a legal professional. We're not going to focus on that, but I wanted to make you aware that that is an issue. Then we're going to look at two more things. First thing I want to go back to is the home button. And then we're going to go over to, the insert button, apologize. We're going to hit insert, and then we're going to go over here to symbol. The symbols that you use routinely are going to be here waiting for you. The one that you've used most frequently is going to be here. For me, that's a section sign. I use this all the time. So if I want to put a section sign in, I can do that all day right here. But let's say I want to use a symbol that I don't routinely use. Well, I'm going to click on it, then I'm going to go to more symbols. Maybe I want to use the paragraph sign. I can click on that, then hit insert. There is the paragraph sign. I'm going to close, and I'm going to look at my list of symbols. Look, it's right here at the beginning. So that can be a helpful way of kind of organizing your things. So what symbols do we care about in this course? Really, I think the only symbol that you need to know for this course is the section symbol. Now again, if you're using Microsoft Word for the first time, it's not going to be waiting here for you. You're going to have to go into more symbols and find it. But once you find it once, you probably don't have to worry about it anymore. So be sure to look at it and figure it out. Here we have, this is the character code. It's 00A as in apple 7. Again, you can also use the shortcut key if you want. Those are some things to consider. There are other useful codes to have. One is for a copyright. The way to make that easily is to do open parens, C, close parens, and you get a copyright symbol. I think there's something like that for a trademark. Yeah, there we go. There's lots of other things to do that Microsoft has designed it for automatic symbols, but you could also find the symbols over here if you wanted to. If you didn't want to use that shortcut for copyright, I'm sure if you were to scroll through here, you would eventually find the C in a circle. But you can also see there's lots and lots of symbols, so it might not be the quickest thing ever to find. But somewhere in here, you could find that symbol. As soon as I say that, I won't be able to find it. You can see different alphabet symbols. We have the Hebrew and the Arabic alphabets, the Cyrillic alphabet. Lots of different symbols, numbers, the euro, the Greek letters. I thought I was going to be able to find it. Maybe I'm not. Anyway, if I had better eyes, I would have probably spotted it by now. But somewhere in here is that symbol. But the one that you need for this class is what's called a section symbol. What it is a fancy S kind of glued together with another fancy S. I mean, you're going to want to use that by going to Insert, over here to Symbol. If you've used it recently, it'll be here. Otherwise, you're going to click on More Symbols and find it in the text. Oh, you can. Oh, here's copyright. So this is the way to do it. Alt-Control-C, trademark, Alt-Control-T. So those are some shortcuts to making those symbols. And then the final thing I want to show you is how to make a table. So let's say that I wanted to make a table with these items in it. Well, I'm going to highlight, or again, I'm going to do this by finding my first item, going to the left of it, right-clicking, then going down to the end, lifting my right-click finger. Then go over here to Table. I'm in the Insert section. I'm going to go to Table. Then I'm going to Insert Table. And it's going to add those items to my list. Let's say I want to have another column to the left over here. Well, then I'm going to highlight this, going to left click now, and I'm going to insert a column to my left. Here I have now a column. I can, let's say I don't want to have all of these formats. I can make that go away. Maybe I want to have numbers here. I can go over here and let me switch to numbers. Just wait a second. There we go. I can move this margin around to what I want it to be. I can start a table from scratch. Let me do that. So I might hit Insert, Table, and let's say I wanted to have 4 columns, 3 levels. Maybe this is going to be children, ages, genders, birth dates. So I might list my first child, Mary, and her age is 15, and she's female. And then my son, Adam, who's 13 and male. And I might want to put these in bold since they're my headings. And now I've got a nice table. Maybe I want to put these in italics. Good to go with that. But let's say I don't want to show the grids. I don't want to show these lines. I'll just kind of shrink this up a little bit because I don't need quite this much room. So I've decided to get rid of this category. So I'm going to delete this column, and we have this chart here. So let's say I decide I don't want all of these lines on it. So what I'm going to do is, again, select a table. I'm going to left click, and I'm going to pick Table Properties. I can choose all kinds of things within the property, how tall I want my cells to be, do I want the content, actually let me look at the, yeah, let's see. So right now I have everything kind of left justified. Maybe I want it to be in the center of the page. Maybe I want these columns to be it's not going to work. Center. That's not working there. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong there. But in any event, maybe it's options here. I guess what I can do here is just using this. Oh, there we go. So that's how I can do it. I can just use these buttons, the left justify, center, or right justify, to get the items where I want it. If this were money instead of age, I would probably want to right justify it. So let's say that this for $5. Well, that doesn't look very good. I mean, you want those dots to be lined up. So I'd probably want to right justify that column. But let's say again, I don't want these lines dividing up my text. Well, I go up here to my borders and I can pick no borders and all of the lines go away. It's still a table and I can, if I ever choose to add the lines back, I can. I don't have to add them all back though. I can just do outside bound borders or lots of different combinations of it. So those are some ways of making tables. It's a good thing to play around with. And many times in legal documents, people choose not to show the borders at all. I'm not saying you can't, but still it's a good way to format things so things are nice and crisp. Probably for this one, I would go ahead and make it like this. So this is a nice sharp edge. We do have one assignment in this class where tables are very useful to doing, to working with it. Now it is true you can tab and do other things and create basically the same thing as a table, but I would say tables, especially when you're working with a lot of data, is usually a little bit easier to work with than lots and lots of tabbing. So at this point we are done with the kind of intro to Microsoft Word, topics that I wanted to be sure to cover. I hope that this information has been helpful for you. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you for your attention as always. Bye-bye.